and welcome to JANA'S hut. In this episode I'm going to be doing some paint testing on the first piece that I made, the first machine. We'll be using these paints. There are others available, but I know that these work. I know how they work. I like to buy the colour that I'm going to use rather than try and mix one up, so that every time I go to paint it is the same colour, so that you have a consistency throughout your pieces. If I were to attempt to mix the same colour each time on separate occasions, I could end up with a different shade of that colour. These paints are made by Citadel. Originally I gave this piece a black undercoat. Today I'll be using Rhinox hide, Zandri dust, and I'm going to finish off with a colour Wraithbone. Whilst looking at the colours of moisture vaporisers, it was very difficult to see what colour they actually are. After having a good look, I believe that they are originally meant to be this colour, and they turn this colour due to the conditions on Tatooine. I'll be trying to achieve that effect, so I will be painting it this colour first, giving it a good coat of that, so that I can get the right tones when I finish. Always remember to give your paints a good shake before using them. Just going to get a big blob of that. This is from a plastic cup, just cut it. You can be as liberal as you like when painting a base coat, as long as you make sure that you don't leave any lines or streaks in your paint. Always go over it a few times just to make sure you've got all the excess paint moved about. Make sure you get into all the little places, that the recesses. Just slowly work your way up the machine. Make sure you have somewhere to hold, otherwise you'll just get the paint all over your fingers. Make sure you get every angle. I've got to a point where I can no longer hold it at the top, so I'm going to let it dry for a bit and then continue painting. Now the paint's dry at the base, I can hold it, which means I can paint the rest. It's good to keep paint off your hands because it can peel off from what you're painting. It's getting there. Just need to do the top bit and that'll be the base coat done. Some surfaces don't take paint as well as others. This is a metal eyelet, and as you can see the paint just won't stick to some parts. So I've got it all painted brown now. It's a nice brown colour. This is another piece that is black, so you can see the difference in the tones there. It was hard to see because of my bad lighting, that what I was painting on was actually painting brown, but eventually I got there. The reason why I've painted this brown first is so that all the deepest recesses will have that dark brown colour to it. If I haven't coated it in brown, it will have that black underneath. Before I painted it black, it looked like this. It's made up of lots of different little pieces. I'm just going to let that dry. I'm going to go and clean my brush. Got a few different brushes here. I was just using this one to do the undercoat on this, but I think I'm going to use this one to do the next coat of paint. I'll be using a technique called dry brushing, so this brush I believe will be ideal for that. There are many different types of brush that you can get. This is a very cheap one, so the bristles are a bit tough. This is very soft. I like to use this for detailing. And this one should just go in the bin. The technique I'm going to be using today is called dry brushing. I'll try and explain it to you as I go. So what I'm going to do is get a blob of paint out of this lid and throw it down there. Put the lid back on, always important. As I've just got the paint out of the pot, my brush is pretty stacked with paint. So what you're going to do is get as much off as you can. That's a bit better, but the technique is called dry brushing. So what I could do is dab the excess on here, but I'm not too sure I want to do that just yet, because there are some details that, like this, that I can just apply the paint to. Trying to be careful not to get too much on any other bits that I don't want to cover yet. Okay, so that's given quite a nice cover to that. Now there's a lot less paint on the brush. So what I'm going to do is keep just applying it to places that I know that it will apply. And can you see it's already having a little bit of a effect. Because there's not enough paint on the brush to coat the whole area. You get this nice weathered look. And once it is really difficult to get paint off the brush and it feels really dry, then you can just start to gently go over bits. This is a little bit too dry. Just dab excess off Let's have another go. These ridges are going down, so what you want to do is go across. Just hover the brush over where you want to paint a little bit further than you'd like it to catch. If it's got a lot of paint on it, it won't work as well, the technique. Eventually you can be really rough with it. Not too rough that you break what you've made. As you can see, I've just gone the wrong way and painted inside the bit. Just keep going. So the brush is really dry now and it's doing that. Whereas with a fully loaded brush, it does that. And here is where it's gone over a bit. Just neaten that up. Probably just made it worse. Just keep going. There'll be a point where the harder you push, when there's less paint on it, the harder you push, the more paint will come off the brush because it's collected at the top rather than down there. So the brush has gone too deep, but that's okay because it matches this. So I'm just going to do it on all the way around. What you don't want to do is start rushing and getting paint on bits you don't want. You want to keep working at a nice steady pace so that you only paint the bits you want to paint. So I'm giving this a bit of a shoddy paint job, but that's all part of the effect I'm going for. Not much paint left on the brush, so I can get back to doing this. That's no paint at all. So paint in here. So as these bits are going up, you want to paint across so that you're just catching the tops. I can see that's too much paint, so I'm going to go over here, put a bit of paint over here, excess paint. Oh, I've just gone and added all that excess paint into that instead. So let's try this again. Go across. What you do there is just catching the raised bits and leaving the recesses to give the effect of built up dirt. And I could go further into those and really get the brown all out. But I like the way that it looks. I'm just going to use the rest of the paint. Just attack this super glue lid. Look at that. So because I've got a lot less paint on the brush now, it's hard for the paint to get into this recess. Not much is left on it. So I've got to be careful where I paint now, so not to ruin that, because you can't recreate it. With dry brushing, you can't really recreate the colour underneath once you've covered it, unless you're very skilled, then please do so. But I find with this technique, once you cover something, it's difficult to get it uncovered. Big blob of excess paint there. Get these covered. I'm going to go back to this. I've got a little less paint on the brush. Just go back and forth really gently, so that collects all the paint. You don't want to be too violent because you can snap off the piece that you stuck down. I've had that happen many times. Sometimes with this technique you can end up with patches of paint that you don't really want. So now I've got to a point where I've got to let that dry so that I can paint the base. With this base, because the sizing of the gap is so large, you can just go straight in with the paint that's loaded on the brush, as long as you keep to the rules of a bit of a distance and you go the opposite way to whatever ridges you want to have collect dirt. You just flick the brush round. If I wanted to, I could get into every single groove, but if I do that, then you won't see the highlights and the lowlights, which is what I want to keep. Just keep going until you're happy that you do have enough coverage. I've reached a point where I believe that I've got enough coverage of this colour. I'm happy with how that's looking so far. So now I'm going to be adding my final colour. There is a possibility that I will add this after, which is a wash. It says it's a shade. This I'll be adding now. With a nice clean brush, I'll be getting a nice big blob of that out. Putting that down. Again, I'll be using a dry brush technique on this layer. I'm just going to test it out on this bit first, just to see. Oh, that's very bright. Just take some paint off of there. And just like dabbing it on. To give it that white colour. I feel that my brush is quite dry, so I'm going to go for this on here. Sort of happening, sort of working. Just getting a bit more this paint. Let's try it on this one. It's a lot of paint. Just trying to dab it on. No, there's too much. You see that happen there? I went up. Already in here, there's 3 layers of colour, just adding to that dirt effect, because they are always filthy. These moisturiser, vaporizer, moisturiser. Again, it's collecting in there. Didn't really want that, but it's happened. You can see when there's hardly any paint left on the brush, because it just changes the colour of things, and that's when you can start building up layers of this colour to make it more vibrant. I just picked up quite a lot of paint. So if I have quite a bit of paint on here, I tend to go for the bits that I know I want to have the colour, and then I'll know once I've used up most of this paint, I can go for the lighter details. Haven't done the base, but all I'd have to do is paint that black maybe. Just gently add in layers of this colour. It's slowly getting there, the layers are building up. You just need to be careful not to go overboard on this highlight. As you move your piece around, you will notice different angles, sometimes bits that you've missed. I'm going to leave that piece in the middle. Again, I'm just going to let that dry for a bit so I can paint the base. When you've got a really dry brush, you can really go for it. Push it hard. It will collect all on the bits that you want. Eventually it will just stop working. But for the most part you want to be really careful. Just take your time. I think just a little bit more paint on here and this piece might be finished. Oh look, just there, all that unpainted. So it's good to just turn it round, different angles, all of that's unpainted. There'll be bits that you've missed. Where's it gone? There. You can see the writing. See what I've done there is I pushed too hard. It's very bright. Again. Just going to go round so it's consistent. Go over this bit a bit more. I've done there. But really it's good to have it lighter at the top, darker at the base, because that's where the sand will be collecting. So I've given it a good coating of this, and now I end up with this piece. I've given it a good coat of the highlight colour that I chose, and I think that it's worked out really well. I could do a bit more highlighting, but I think I'm going to leave it as it is for now. I could add a bit of silver paint to it in places just to give it a nice bit of metal trim. There's meant to be a control panel right here. Not too sure how I'm going to colour that yet, but I think the dry brushing technique has worked really well. This is definitely a dirty, grubby space machine. I'm going to leave the highlighting bits till I paint more pieces, just so that I can then decide what pieces I would like to paint differently. Maybe the button should be a different colour, but for now I'm going to leave it like that. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that it has inspired you to be creative and create your own machines. Please get painting. Please don't be afraid to make mistakes. You can always paint over what you've made a mistake on and start again. You can just tell people that that's how you wanted it, that's how you intended it. But for now I'm going to leave that like that. Please leave any comments down below. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.